All right. Welcome, everyone, to our Postcards to Swing State new program webinar. I'm very excited that you are all here. We will get started in just a minute or two. Many of you are already doing this, but please use the chat if you find that feature in YouTube to share where you're from. Use the chat throughout the night. It's good to have community, especially right now with the just utter constitutional chaos that we find ourselves in. It's an important time to be out there. I'm sure that many, if not most of you on this call have been doing protests April 5th. Future actions, we need to continue to escalate those actions. We're going to have to walk and chew gum because we will have elections this year in several states and then in 2026. So I'm excited to talk about some of the ways that we at Progressive Turnout Project are focused on making sure that that part of the equation comes together. And but absolutely the grassroots actions that so many people are involved in across the country to fight back and to not be silent are so critically important as well. Thanks again so much for being here. I'm just going to check on how many people are with us. So we're right at about 1,000 folks, and that's exciting. This is obviously on YouTube live. It is recorded in real time, so you will be able to find this recording at any point in the future through the same link that you used to get here right now. So please share that out with others, or if you're not able to be here with us the entire time. This will go about 55 minutes, maybe an hour, give or take. I didn't time it all out, but I will go ahead and jump right in. And again, please use the chat throughout the evening. Be respectful. We have one of our fantastic postcard organizers, Sue, is the only person really monitoring the chat to answer questions. So bear with us, because with over 1,500 people already on the call, we won't be able to get to all those questions live. It's helpful to see the questions that are there. Especially this year, I plan to actually host some more not just webinars like this where it's just me talking, but Q&A sessions where people can join later in the year to ask more detailed questions. So my goal here is to answer a lot of the questions throughout the presentation that often come up. Won't be able to address everything. I do look at the chat mostly afterwards and plan ways to do that. The contact information for how to reach us is at the end, but postcards at turnoutpack.org is our email to be able to ask questions at any point as well, and we do our absolute best to respond to all the questions that we get. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. First of all, I am Reed McCollum. My pronouns are he, him. I am the Program Outreach Director at Progressive Turnout Project. I am also the founder of Postcards to Swing States. I'm originally from Asheville, North Carolina. I know we got some folks from North Carolina and Asheville on the call, all over the country, volunteers in all 50 states and US territories. I live up in Chicago. I've been in the suburbs here with my wife and 2 daughters since 2005. I've been with Progressive Turnout Project since 2021. I also, and this is more recent, am the chair of the Democratic Party of DuPage County, which is Illinois' second most populous county. So we just had our local elections, elected 49 out of 49 Democrats that we ran. So we are absolutely winning elections left and right as the Democratic Party and fighting back all over the country. We need to keep that up. The agenda for this time together, this hour or so, is I'm going to briefly talk about Progressive Turnout Project. We had tens of thousands of first-time volunteers last year. Many of you have been writing with us for several cycles, so thank you. Want to make sure that we bring new people on to understand kind of what we're all about. We'll talk about the impact that we've already had so far just this year in 2025 across the country, how our postcard program works. The most important thing is the data behind why we know it's effective, some of the lessons that we took away from the elections in 2024. I will talk about that. We do have a new type of program that really is built off of some of the lessons from the presidential election last year. And then I'll talk about our plans, not just that are going to get launched here in a few weeks for 2025, but in the midterms next year as well. Just to start off, Progressive Turnout Project is a really unique organization. We're the largest direct voter contact organization within the progressive movement, and direct voter contact is essentially everything that's not just advertising, like digital or TV advertising. It is door-to-door canvassing, relational organizing, having organizers supporting campaigns, and handwritten postcards to voters. So as an organization, we're entirely funded by small dollar contributions that average like $16. So we're not founded by a billionaire. Plenty of great work by organizations that are. Pros and cons with that model, but we're funded by small dollar contributions. Our focus is boosting turnout amongst Democrats. So that's called mobilization rather than persuading independent voters. But our focus as an organization is rallying Democrats to vote. So reaching out to people that may not vote, but if they vote are likely to vote for Democrats, and also motivating and inspiring people who had just given up on the system entirely, but who are really aligned with our values in our coalition. And we need those people. We need to do a better job. In 2024, as an organization, we invested almost $53 million in direct voter contact in races all across the country. That is a huge amount of money to spend in field, direct voter contact, canvassing, postcards, relational organizing, putting organizers on campaigns. We, through our programs, reached almost 64 million voters across the country. Our core program, and this isn't a volunteer program, but like the heart of what we do at Progressive Turnout Project, just so you're kind of aware of this, is door-to-door canvassing and a model that we call distributed organizing that pays door knockers in rural and exurban communities where most of the volunteer capacity or paid canvassing in cities doesn't get out there. So we try to really cover a lot of the areas in key states and key races that are not getting knocked by existing organizations in the campaign itself. So we do that with a model that allows people to pick where they go, flexible schedules. It compensates them for doing this important work. And that is the largest program and investment that we make to help Democrats win across the country. We also have a campaign fellows program, which it provides the financial resources for hundreds of organizers to assist on both federal and state campaigns that are competitive all across the country. So dozens of states across the country, hundreds of people paid as field organizers to knock doors and have conversations with voters. And then obviously our postcard program, which we'll talk about tonight. The impact that we've already had this year in 2025, there's some successes that we can hold up and feel really good about. Many of you probably were aware of this when it happened about a month ago, maybe less. James Malone flipped a district in Pennsylvania that Trump had won by 15 points. And we provided over $100,000, which is almost the bulk of his campaign fund. And we also had 2 full-time paid fellows on his campaign. And that was incredible to see a district that Trump had won by 15 points flip, and a Democrat won that by just about a percentage point. And obviously there have been other really great successes in special elections. On April 1st in Wisconsin, I bet every person on this call was involved in some capacity with helping to make sure Judge Susan Crawford was victorious in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. She won by 10 points, so that's a lot. It was incredible. As an organization, we invested over $1 million in door knocking, paid door knocking, that distributed organizing program that I mentioned across Wisconsin. And we also, many of you, our volunteers wrote 1.1 million postcards to make sure that people were getting out and voting in the April 1st election as well. So huge success there. We also were involved in special elections already this year in Virginia, Maine, and Minnesota. And we're planning to for sure be involved in additional special elections throughout the year as they come up, whether or not we do a postcard program from them. And we get a ton of emails about, are we going to do postcards for particular special elections? Just so you are aware, most special elections are so small that if we do a postcard program, we're going to send an email just to our volunteers in that particular state, and they will sign up for all the postcards within like the first day. So even if we get involved in special elections throughout the year, you may not hear about them because there's just so many of you, which is fantastic. And for a state house district in Michigan, it is maybe 30,000 postcards or something like that, and we would be able to have way too many people help with that. So it's a good problem to have. But we will be involved in special elections. We often have fellows embedded in those campaigns, helping them knock doors to reach those voters. Sometimes we'll do postcards as well, and we'll let you know about it. Postcards to swing states. I just want to, especially for new folks, really kind of highlight how our program works, why it's unique, before I get into just really why we know it's effective and some of the lessons learned, and then the specific timing of our programs this year. So we were founded in my garage and my friend Ramsey's garages in Illinois back in 2020. A lot of volunteers helped us. We were volunteers. Since that time, hundreds of thousands of great volunteers, like many of you, have helped us write 85 million Get Out the Vote postcards since 2020. So it is for sure more handwritten messages to voters than any other organization across the country doing either letters or postcards. The more the merrier. There are many great organizations doing postcards. We often are in touch with them. So it is fantastic. The most important thing is to do good work and reach voters and make a difference and have an impact. We're the only organization that provides millions of postcards for free. There are some programs that'll provide free postcards. That's one of the things that make us this unique, is we're doing tens of millions of postcards in a cycle. Again, we're funded by grassroots small dollar contributions, so it is really people powered. But we make sure that those postcards are free, because stamp prices are not free. Stamps are not free. You all are aware, if you've written postcards, that stamps are a significant financial investment that you are already making for democracy, and it is incredible that you do that. The least we can do is raise the money to print postcards for the absolute possible cheapest price. The volume discount on millions of postcards is pretty great. We provide the voter lists and instructions. And then our obligation is to make sure that the messages that we ask you to write are the most effective messages possible. So I'll talk more about that. We do have our volunteers handwrite both the message and the address. We believe that makes the postcard stand out to be as effective as possible. You can see in these pictures at the bottom there, like some people decorate them, use colored pens. You don't have to do that. It's fantastic, but just that really stands out. If we wanted to have the addresses not be handwritten, we would frankly just print them on the postcards. So we would not be sending mailing labels, because we could literally just have our printers put the addresses directly on the postcard if we didn't want you to handwrite them. So you as volunteers provide the postage, handwrite the message, handwrite the addresses, and then follow our instructions and mail the postcards to voters on a particular date. So that's just the whole model for how our postcard program works. So we are data driven. We are obsessed with making sure that our postcards are effective, and that the only way to do that is to measure our program, to refine it, and then to measure it again. We're not alone in that. There is almost 20 years of research by leading math geeks and social science experts on what is effective. The Analyst Institute is a great organization that has really, it's free to members of organizations that are working in democratic politics or the progressive movement, where statistical randomized controlled experiments data on what's effective is shared and published. It's fantastic. If you're looking for a book that you can read that gets into what is effective for boosting turnout, Get Out the Vote is what I would recommend. It's written by two academics that were really the first to do sort of public randomized controlled experiments. This book, Get Out the Vote, is on its 5th edition. If you've been on one of my webinars before, you've probably already heard me pitch this book, but they've done a meta-analysis of over 15 public-facing studies that suggest handwritten postcards generate an average of 1 vote every 71 postcards, about 3 times as effective as conventional nonpartisan mail. I'm not going to disagree with that, except to say that postcards by themselves are not effective. It is a mode. Phone calls, door-to-door canvassing, mail, they're not inherently effective. It is about what you do with that mode. Like, there are messages you can write on a postcard that will actually backfire and suppress turnout. Some messages are more effective than others. When you send the postcard is very important. Whether it's a presidential election or a local school board election has a huge impact on how effective your program is. And that's true for everything. So, you have to be cautious when you're comparing apples to oranges if you look at statistics about something. But the first thing, if you're looking at a program, is do they measure and have they published any results on what they do, or are they just winging it based on their own intuitions? And with the best of intentions, sometimes programs might not be as effective as you might expect. So that at least is our obligation, is at this scale as the largest organization, to make sure that we are taking advantage of all the research that's out there and doing our own. I rarely get into this, but it's really important. There are 2 broad ways that you can try to impact potential voters. The first is mobilization, which is basically just boosting turnout amongst people. So getting more people to go vote, particularly Democrats. That is the focus of our programs normally. That is our organization's goal, is to rally Democrats to vote. I don't often talk about the other option, which is to persuade people to vote for Democrats or a particular candidate, rather than Republicans. And the reason for that is that we just don't do persuasion really as an organization. So if you've done postcards before for a particular candidate, where it's all about making sure voters know who this candidate is and what they stand for, that's great. That is data driven. That can be very effective. That is part of persuasion, is to make sure voters know that this candidate believes in these issues and that you should go vote for them. So I will talk more about persuasion. And, I think there's going to be a theme here later on about, if we are doing a mobilization program to boost turnout amongst Democrats, if you kind of hijack the program and craft your own message and do something totally different that you think would persuade people, you were actually probably doing harm, if not only by reducing the benefit of what we're actually focused on, but potentially making up your own message that might not be grounded in science. And so I really want that transparency about the why we do what we do to come through in this. Okay, this is a fun slide with graphics about randomized controlled experiments. So if you are a statistics nerd, this one is for you. So we have done we've tested 15 postcard messages ourselves in huge randomized controlled experiments, and proven that postcards can be effective at boosting turnout by up to 1.3 percentage points. So what is the science behind that? If you're not familiar with the randomized controlled experiment, it is the same way that a pharmaceutical company will test the effectiveness of a new pharmaceutical drug, or like the COVID vaccine. You take a huge group of people, or in our case, a huge group of people, millions of voters, and you either randomly or in a very controlled way create 2 groups. A control group of people that aren't going to get a treatment, or in our case, postcards, and then an identical group from every important variable that will get postcards. And then in our case, after the election, you look at the turnout rate amongst the control group, like what percentage of those people went out and voted, and the turnout rate amongst the treatment group. And so we have done numerous experiments with a third party, PhD mathematicians, experts, the Movement Cooperative, tested the effectiveness of our programs. We've won 3 awards from the Analyst Institute for that work. We've partnered with messaging experts. And then this last bullet point, we are the only organization that publishes RCTs, or randomized controlled experiments, with postcards that include millions of voters, which yields just very, very, very high statistical confidence. There's always a stat called the p-value, which is like, what are the odds that this occurred by random chance? And our p-values are usually like below 1 in a 10,000 chance that the results that we measure are just statistical noise. So, I can't emphasize that enough, is that there are other organizations that do RCTs, and usually there are thousands of people or tens of thousands of people in the population that receive postcards. In our case, it's usually a few million people that got postcards. So the statistical confidence when we do an experiment is just unprecedented, to be honest, in terms of measuring something at this scale. And as a result of our work, but then the 20 years of work through the Analyst Institute and orgs that are data driven, these are just some mobilization best practices. And again, I want to be really clear, persuasion is a totally different thing. What is effective for persuading people is totally different than this, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But when our goal is to get more people out to vote who, if they vote, are likely going to vote for Democrats, these are the best practices. So messages that focus on the voting process itself are more effective than those that focus on the candidate, the party, or issues. Again, within mobilization, if you're trying to persuade people to vote for candidate X or for Democrats or to support a particular issue, obviously those things would be really effective. But when our goal is to get people out to vote who just might be otherwise inclined to stay home or need a reminder or a little bit disengaged from politics, they don't follow it every day, but if they vote, they're probably going to vote for us, because if there's one thing they know about Republicans, they're not on their side. Those are the folks where our program is most effective, and messages that talk about the voting process are the most effective. Of all of the messages that you can devise to do that, providing information, really inspiring messages about your vote is your voice, of all of the different frameworks that have been tested, none is more effective or anywhere close to as effective as social pressure. And that can be gratitude or a message of social accountability, which leverages our just evolutionary tribal psychology that we want to fit in and do what is expected of us and do the right thing. And it is like peer pressure, but it is also gratitude. It is anything that is social accountability, that it's a social norm to go vote. And I'll share what those messages are. So if you're like, I have no idea what he's talking about, it might make sense when you see the message options that we've been using for a few years now, because they're proven to be the most effective. So messages that are overtly partisan are very likely to be ineffective or even backfire for mobilization. And so if it's really best not to craft your own message, especially if you're aiming to persuade voters, and especially if you're sending those to the voters that we're targeting for mobilization. It will do harm. And to be honest, a few times a week we answer an email somebody that just thinks our messages are they can't possibly be effective. Like, we're in a constitutional crisis. Like, why can't we have more direct, hard-hitting, effective messages? And it's because these are the effective messages for what we're doing. And it is important that we don't waste our time and energy on things that are not effective, but might feel good, or how we feel and projecting that to the voter. And it's like, if I just say this, which is the thing that I'm screaming at my TV when I'm watching MSNBC, they have to suddenly understand. And it's just a very human and sort of, appropriate reaction for us want people to understand how important this all is, but we want to be effective. Yeah, okay, so the most effective message that has been tested at scale ever with postcards multiple times is the message that we recommend people use on the instructions that we send out. Thank you for being a voter. Who you vote for is private, but whether you vote is public record. Please vote in the Tuesday, November 5th election. It is absolutely true that who you vote for is private. Letting people know, which is all this what this message does, is that it's public record whether you vote or not, is massively effective. The goal of the postcard is not to have the person be so grateful that they got the postcard. It is for them to go vote. And so some people do get annoyed. They're like, who are you guys to tell me, like, this is kind of weird? And so if your reaction and your friend's reaction when you're writing postcards is like, I wouldn't want to get that, totally valid. It is just undeniably proven from overwhelming data to be the most effective way to get people to vote. So the data is the data. It's been proven in hundreds of randomized controlled experiments. We found it to be 50% more effective than the other two messages that we give people the option to write. So you never have to write that message if you do our program. You never have to write that message. We always include in our instructions the second and third most effective options that we have ever tested. Thank you for being a voter. Your friends and family may need your reminder to vote. Please ask them to vote in the Tuesday, November 5th election. Or thank you for being a voter. When will you vote in the Tuesday, November 5th election? Please plan ahead. I completely understand that in a constitutional crisis with a fascist president who is eviscerating the Constitution, that these messages do not feel like they are the right thing for that time. And it is completely reasonable to have that reaction. These are the most effective way to get Democrats to go vote. And I will cover another program that that we're launching this year as well that goes about a different strategy because again, boosting turnout amongst potential Democratic voters isn't the only effective thing that you can do. If you do our program, please do what is effective for its goals, especially with the people that we are sending the postcards to. This is sort of a really important question that I'm sure that many of you have, which is, okay, I am convinced that these postcards will get more people to go out and vote, but how do we know who they're voting for? If you pay attention to a lot of the post-election analysis, you may know that there's studies that suggest that if every registered or eligible voter had voted in November, President Trump would have won by even more. So if you're thinking, oh my God, like we're writing all these postcards, great, we're boosting turnout, but like, did we just literally help Donald Trump? And how do we know that these people are going to go vote for Democrats? So I'm going to answer that question. The first thing that I'll say, this is just at a high level, is that the nothing about what happened in November suggests that mobilization tactics are ineffective. There are very, very clear lessons that can be taken for what Democrats can and need to do better. But nothing that happened suggests that mobilization tactics are ineffective. In fact, it's the opposite. If you look at the swing states swung from Biden in 2020 to Trump by 3.1 percentage points. The overall country, everywhere else, swung by over twice that, 6.6%. So where we did a heavy investment in get out the vote, door knocking, mail, handwritten postcards, we were much, much closer than the country as a whole. So by working aggressively to boost turnout in those swing states, and turnout was actually up in almost all the swing states, we closed the gap pretty dramatically. So there isn't counter evidence. I'll start there. There is evidence that mobilization, as we already know it to be, is really effective. So the reason that mobilization works isn't because automatically higher turnout helps Democrats. It's not that just all we're trying to do is boost turnout. The reason that our mobilization tactics work is because it is targeted. And there isn't really a lot of variation amongst Democratic campaigns or organizations in terms of what its targeted means. Like we all do pretty much the same thing. And it is very knowable which potential voters are far more likely to support Democrats than Republicans. There are voters where you just don't know, and we don't really include them. But I'll give you an example. Take somebody who's 25 years old, and we'll just use Wisconsin as an example. If you are a white man in Wisconsin who's 25 years old and you live in a rural county, you are very likely to support Donald Trump if you voted last fall. We don't know if you're going to vote or not, and it might be something like 90% of 25-year-old white men in rural counties in Wisconsin would vote for Donald Trump. So we don't know which of 10 25-year-old white voters in a particular rural county were going to vote for Donald Trump. But if you have 1,000 of them, it's probably about 900. And so like that is the level of accuracy. It's not for an individual voter, but for a population of voters, that a certain percentage of them are going to vote for Democrats versus Republicans. If you take a 25-year-old Black woman who lives in Milwaukee, she might have been 95% likely to vote for Kamala Harris if she went out and voted. And both on the geography and just and that's it's not sort of an assumption, or it's not something that we just stereotype. Like organizations measure those to calibrate to know that they're accurate based on where people live, exit polling, additional polling. So basically like all Democratic groups use a process like that. And there are plenty of people where we just wouldn't be able to know. It could be that a certain population, 50% of them are going to vote for Trump, 50% of them are going to vote for Harris. And it doesn't need to be perfect. But when we send postcards, based on all the modeling, we feel confident that about 90% of all of the people that vote because we sent them postcards, or just really 90% of the people that receive our postcards, if they vote, they're going to vote for Democrats. And so you can rest assured that we have no concerns that we boosted turnout for Republicans. Like we literally know that a small percentage of people that we get to vote are going to do that. But 90% of the people that vote because of our program voting for Democrats, which is going to be pretty consistent across anything that you ever do to help Democrats for mobilization. Like there's not a lot of variation. There's no secret sauce in that. It's kind of just baked in. So, okay. Our 2025 postcard programs, which is probably the main reason that you're here, is to hear about what the postcard programs are that we're about to launch, and I'll talk about those. So this fall, there are statewide elections in 3 states: Virginia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. So we always do postcards for Virginia. We did postcards for New Jersey as well in 2021. These are the designs of the postcards that we're doing. Virginia has actually the design sort of theme that we used last year, because we didn't send any postcards to Virginia last year except for a couple House races that didn't get this card. And then the New Jersey and Pennsylvania, that's a new similar design of the cards that we're going to go with for this year and into 2026 that we're excited about. So in Virginia, obviously there's the gubernatorial race. Abigail Spanberger is the only Democrat candidate, I believe. Their whole state legislature is up, which is not common. One of the only states where their whole state leg is up. And then they have municipal elections. So we're going to be doing get out the vote postcards with our normal messages in Virginia. In New Jersey, they have a governor's race, state house races, and municipals. Virginia is not is always competitive. New Jersey is a little bit safer, but like it absolutely is a state where we need to keep our eye on it. We want to do postcards there to make sure that we don't have any big upsets for Republicans. Jersey was much closer in 2024 than a lot of people would have thought. So we absolutely have to do the work to make sure that state has Democratic victories up and down. And there are absolutely places where our postcards will make sure that Republicans lose razor thin local elections in New Jersey. And local government is the front line of defense against Donald Trump right now. So you can always know that our programs are helping make sure that some of those down ballot races go our way in terms of values aligned candidates, even in nonpartisan races. And then in Pennsylvania, they do have municipal local elections across the state, but there are very important Supreme Court retentions. There are 3 Democratic Supreme Court justices up in Pennsylvania where voters will give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down in terms of being retained. Party will not be on the ballot. It'll just say, these are the judges' names. Do you want to retain them or not? So in this particular case, we're actually going to modify our normal message options and mention that people should vote yes. for the Democrats, to let voters know who these people are. They're great Democratic Supreme Court justices, and we want voters to vote yes, to retain them. They're not running against anybody. It's just those three names. They need to retain them. If they're not retained, then the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania will be tied. And because the Republican Senate in Pennsylvania may not allow Governor Shapiro to fill those vacancies, they would be tied until the spring of 2027, when they would run, when whoever runs after a primary would run in a general election in the spring of 2027. So we want to make sure that the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania stays in Democratic hands for very obvious reasons in terms of access to voting and every other important thing that happens that gets up to the state Supreme Court. These are the numbers around the Get Out the Vote program this fall. Our mailing dates are going to be in mid and late October to boost turnout for early voting, mail voting, and then on election day. Overall, it's about 7.5 million postcards that we're asking folks to help us write to get out the vote in these three states in the fall. The brand new program, totally different than anything we've ever done before, we're calling News Boosting. And this program is going to launch, you know what, I'm just realizing the timing. So I apologize. We are going to start signups for these three states, Virginia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, on or slightly before May 1st. So on or before May 1st, you can sign up at turnoutpack.org/postcards and sign up to order postcards for Virginia, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. This year, we have the option of ordering just 100 postcards. Many people have already been doing that by writing that in. There's no limit on how many postcards a large group can do. And by starting in May, you've got plenty of time because the mailing dates are not until October. So these three programs are starting May 1st. Apologize for not putting that on the slide. Seems pretty obvious in hindsight that was important. News boosting. So there's sort of layers to explaining what this program is, but what it actually is will be 10 postcards that voters will receive over the year in Virginia. We're only doing this program in Virginia in 2025 because we're doing an experiment to measure it. So it's a pilot program. Those 10 postcards will share useful headlines paired with handwritten messages. So these are some example handwriting. So these aren't, I don't have a mock-up of the card yet, but like we will be having different headlines that are prominent on the postcard. Trump team revokes $11 billion in funding for addiction mental health care. Virginia officials are bracing for an exodus of federal employees losing their jobs. Hundreds of thousands of Virginia kids could lose access to free school meals. Here's why. They are headlines from real news sources in Virginia that we're confident not everybody's seeing. People are not aware anymore of what is actually happening, like actual reality. And so this program is all about to essentially force feeding the news to people who may not otherwise be getting reality and hearing about the harms that are happening that could impact them and their loved ones. There are two goals to this program: to influence their partisanship. We are going for persuasion. We are going to persuade people to vote for Democrats. And we are going to be doing that using what is actually effective and proven by data to be effective. And I'll talk about that, but by force feeding headlines about some of the horrible things that are happening and doing it in sort of an objective way, that is proven to be effective. That is a solid theory of persuasion, is to provide new information from an objective source. So we want people to vote for Democrats. We're going to be looking for that. Do they vote for Abigail Spanberger? And what is their likelihood of voting? So do more people actually turn out and vote? So we won't be sending these postcards to like the far right MAGA extremists. We're going to be sending them to some of the people that are kind of unknown in terms of whether they're Democrats or Republicans. So people that are not 90% likely to vote for Democrats, but people that are, 50% likely to vote for Democrats or higher. So we will be measuring how effective this is for persuading people that might not be that engaged or feel strongly about either party. Um, and so we'll be doing that in a large experiment, 10 postcards over the course of much of the year. This approach is not created in a vacuum. It is partly in reaction to recent trends in news consumption in the 2024 election. So, I think probably everybody knows that fewer people are watching the same evening news broadcast. They are getting propaganda delivered to them with algorithms on TikTok, and disinformation abounds on Facebook. And so many people have just entirely tuned it out. And then many people are getting indirect propaganda delivered to them on a Chinese app with algorithms. And so it's never been more important than it is now to break through and really reach a lot of people that are not getting coherent factual information. This theory is inspired by the late Hal Malchow, who's one of the founders of the Analyst Institute, one of the absolute legends in understanding what's effective research over decades. This was his last book. I highly recommend it. 2 book recommendations now going forward for always. And the most important sort of just fundamental thing about what persuades people is new information. So if you think about what is new information, what do we mean new information? It's if anybody on this call was a Republican back in 2006 or 2012, events are what caused you to realize that you're no longer a Republican. It might have been it might have been the Iraq War. It might have been Donald Trump getting elected in 2016. It might have been the insurrection on the Capitol. It might have been when Dobbs was overturned. There are people that stopped being Democrats because of Biden's age. It is actual reality and events. So the news, real things, are generally the most important thing that cause people to switch their political allegiance and over the long term. And that is scary when people are not getting the real news and they're getting fed constant propaganda by Fox News, TikTok, Facebook, algorithms, disinformation, everything that comes out of anybody's mouth that works in the White House right now. It is horrifying. And that has a real impact on folks. And so we're going to counter that with an experiment that provides and measures real information and how persuasive it is when delivered on 10 handwritten postcards over the course of a year before an election. This sort of says all that in a different way. This is from Blue Rose Research, which has a great slide deck that Ezra Klein had on his podcast. It's on YouTube, but David Shore, Blue Rose Research, did some great analysis. Essentially, this says 2 things, which is the people who get their news from TikTok or social media in general swung more towards Trump than people who get their news from broadcast news or local TV. So the more your news comes from TikTok, the more likely you were to swing towards Donald Trump. And then the other trend here is that people who don't really follow politics closely at all, who aren't looking for, they're not that interested. They don't really follow a lot of politics, swung the most dramatically towards Donald Trump. And so those kind of come together with, folks in Gen Z who are not paying close attention to politics because they're on TikTok. They get a huge surge in the amount of news consumption from TikTok amongst Gen Z in particular. And then with disengaged voters, they're more likely to support Trump. So that is all horrifying and a great reason to do something like our news boosting program. In Virginia, this program will have a control group of about 300,000 target voters, people who will not receive postcards, so that we can determine whether or not they're effective. We're going to send postcards to another 300,000 target voters. They will be divided up into 2 treatment groups. All of those folks receiving postcards are going to get 10 with 10 separate different news headlines printed on the front of the postcard, and then a handwritten message. One group's handwritten message the voter will get 10 different headlines over 20 weeks with the following message in the back every single time. I'm a volunteer with Informed Voters of VA. We send accurate news headlines from fair sources to regular people. Thank you for doing your part to be an informed voter. And Informed Voters of VA is just a project that we're coming up with. It is not a real organization, but what we are actually doing is exactly what this says, which is sending accurate news headlines from fair sources to regular people. So that's absolutely true. Putting together a website with Informed Voters of EA. So if people sort of search that, and we're putting that name, so it's a real website, it's a real program, it's honest about what it is. It's just part of Progressive Turnout Project and the volunteer work that you guys are doing. It's not a legal entity, and all of that is absolutely signed off on by the best lawyers that we have. So we're not doing anything shady from that standpoint. But the goal of that message is it sounds pretty obvious, to highlight how objective we are in terms of, like, you should trust us because we are messengers that just want to make sure people get accurate, reliable news. So who the messenger is really important. And short of a trusted, reliable family or friend, if it's going to be a stranger that explains why they're doing it, like, why am I getting this postcard from somebody, is going to be the most effective way to have them care about, well, why am I trusting this person who sent me this postcard? So half the voters are going to get 10 postcards, 10 headlines, that message every single time. The other group will get different messages, which are values-based messages that sort of take the issue of whatever it is on the postcard and connect that to our shared values. So if it's a postcard with a headline about cuts to agricultural programs or food programs, the message might be, family farms are critical to the quality of life here in Virginia. Food programs like these feed kids and help keep small farms afloat. So we're working with a great messaging guru, Antonia Scatton, who has a fantastic Substack, Reframing America. If you subscribe to Antonia's Reframing America Substack, then she's one of the best, and she's helping craft these values-based messages. She's incredible. So she's helping us sort of with this program. So those will be 10 different messages if you get a postcard for that treatment group. So why this approach? I think it's, hopefully if I've explained it, but if you're like, this doesn't make any sense, it seems kind of random. If we talk about persuasion, because I told you before, when we're doing mobilization, we don't want to get into any of the things like partisan politics issues. Like, we want to talk about voting. But now that we are trying to persuade people, why don't we just scream to them about how bad Donald Trump is? And it is because you are not providing new information, and you are undercutting your credibility as a messenger. So if you write on a postcard, Donald Trump is destroying democracy, he is a fascist, vote for Democrats, the only information you're providing is that you are a Democrat who hates Donald Trump, and they don't know you. And none of that's new. They know Democrats don't like Donald Trump. Nothing new there. And so that just doesn't do anything. It's true. It's all true. We all know that to be true. We wish we could get into their brain and hypnotize them and have them understand what we know. And that's why we want to write that. But again, we have to provide new information, and the credibility of the messenger is really important. So a highly partisan or polemical, critical message doesn't provide new information, undercuts your credibility. And so that is why we are force feeding favorable news headlines about the bad stuff that Trump is doing. And for these to be effective, it has to be clear, like, who the bad guy is. And so all of these, and that's part of the critical thing that we're trying to test, is like, will people understand that hundreds of thousands of VA kids could lose access to free school meals, and that is Republicans' fault? And so that is an unknown. And so there's this tension between trying to be objective and just provide news, and then if we just say, and it is Donald Trump, that jerk, who is doing this because he doesn't care about you, there's a trade-off there. And one reason we're measuring this is because this is sort of new, and we really want to understand that balance. So sticking to the message, especially in this program where we're measuring the effectiveness of it, is really, really important. If you're not willing to write one of those messages for a news headline, just do not sign up for this program, please, because we really, really want to have these actually get mailed with the messages so that we can understand how effective this approach is. So that's this year. We'll be doing, it's a total of I didn't have a slide for this, but it's 3 million postcards for the news boosting because there are 300,000 voters. We're doing 10 postcards. We will launch signups for this program as soon as it is ready. And that will probably be like mid-May that we'll launch signups. So about 2 to 3 weeks after we launch signups on May 1st for our get out the vote states with elections in November. And again, news boosting is just Virginia. It is a total of 3 million additional postcards. So it's about 10.5 million postcards that we're going to be writing over the rest of this year, in addition to the 1.1 million postcards that many of you helped us write for Wisconsin. So we will be announcing on our website and sending an email out when we launch the Get Out the Vote postcard programs, and then we'll be letting everyone know when we launch the news boosting postcard program in the middle of May. Excuse me. Next year, big midterm year. So we will be doing news boosting postcards again. We won't get the results from this Virginia experiment until the middle of the year. We are confident in this approach. We want to measure it, but we don't want to wait and then not have the opportunity to do that program at all in the midterms. So we are going to be doing news boosting starting right after the November elections this fall. We're not going to have any downtime. So if you want to be writing postcards over Thanksgiving and in December, we got you this time. Normally we have several months where we don't have any postcards, and this year we will be rolling immediately into having news boosting postcards available. And then we will be doing key states in the fall, starting in the spring for states that have important Senate and governor's races, and then every single competitive US House district that's in other states, and then even some state legislative districts in other states. So what that'll look like, I did kind of have more of a timeline for the midterms for some reason. We'll be starting news boosting pretty much a week after the November elections. So a week before Thanksgiving, you'll be able to sign up for news boosting. Those will be mailed between May and September of 2026. So you'll be able to sign up as early as November. The first date for when you would be mailing those postcards is May. And then we will mail 5 news boosting postcards to voters in the states I'll share in just a second between May and September. So it's going to be like 1 per month. Our goal for the news boosting postcards next year is about 4.5 million. And honestly, that's just because that's like my estimate for like how much demand we would have to write those postcards before we pivot and switch over to our Get Out the Vote postcards. If there is a huge amount of demand and people are willing to write more postcards, we would love to send way more news boosting postcards next year in the early part of the year. This is what those 4.5 million postcards would be for news boosting next year. These are the states with the most competitive Senate races: Georgia, which is reelecting John Ossoff; Maine, which is trying to flip the seat held by Susan Collins; Michigan, which is an open Senate seat; and then North Carolina, getting rid of Tom Tillis, my home state, top priority, very vulnerable. And so these are just the most competitive. And because we only think we might have demand for 4.5 million, we're not sending postcards to every target voter in the state. We want to make sure that we're not just sending a single news headline. So we're sending 5 to about 900,000 voters in these states. Maine gets fewer because it is such a small state that is all of the people. Maine will get the full treatment. Then normally May is when we start our Get Out the Vote postcard program. It's the same thing we'll do this year. So we have until May to write those news boosting postcards, and then we're going to pivot to Get Out the Vote postcards. And all of these states are in play. They either have Senate races or gubernatorial races. And this probably will not be the full list. I mean, there are additional states like Florida, Ohio, Texas, maybe even Iowa. I mean, we will expand to additional states once it is clear that we've got a good, or not even a good, we've got a reasonable chance, almost a long shot chance, somewhere between reasonable and long shot, where it is possible that we can pick those up. We will be looking to see what happens and potentially adding more states. And so this is the statewide program. This is when we're going to cover an entire state. There are also many, many competitive U.S. House districts. So if it's a competitive U.S. House district that is in one of those states, we're not doing a House program, because all of the voters in that state that we want to target with postcards will be getting postcards. And because our House district postcards are still just get out the vote postcards, they're not candidate specific. House districts in states like Georgia and Arizona are already covered. So all of the competitive U.S. House districts that are not in states that are already getting postcards are the ones that will get them. So places like California, New York, Illinois, Kansas, Indiana, many states have a couple competitive House districts, and we'll be going pretty broad in terms of looking to flip a lot of Republican seats this year. It's about 6 million postcards overall that we're estimating for the House program, which is about 40 U.S. House districts that are not in our statewide states. And then for state legislative races, so in even more states, we'll be doing some postcards. We did Minnesota last year, which had some really competitive state House and state Senate, which like determined control of the Minnesota legislature. So whenever there are opportunities to control a chamber or influence a supermajority, either for Democrats or preserving one or flipping a chamber or stopping Republicans from gaining a supermajority or breaking a Republican supermajority, like what happened in North Carolina House last year, we will help with postcards for those state legislative races. Again, if they're in states that aren't already getting fully saturated with our postcards program. Overall, when you put it all together, it's about 35 million postcards that we want to write between this year and next year. We did 40 million just last year, but this is 2025 and then the midterms. So it's really ambitious to try to do another 35 million postcards this year and next year. Again, if there is more demand, we'll do more news boosting postcards early next year. We're excited for that Virginia experiment and just share the results of that. And this is it. So, you will be able to order postcards at turnoutpack.org/postcards. You can follow us on social media at Postcards to Win. We are on Blue Sky. We have stopped posting on X for obvious reasons. So please sign up to follow us on Blue Sky. We're active there and on Facebook. And then you can always email us at postcards@turnoutpack.org. I am going to create, we use Google Meet instead of Zoom, but like opportunities for you to sign up for more virtual meetings where you can actually hop on and ask questions. I'm looking forward to that. So if you didn't get your question answered, you can email us. You can look for opportunities to sign up for those Q&As. We also have now a library of webinars of mostly me talking about postcards on our YouTube channel. And they're either under videos or live, where you can see that. If you have particular questions and concerns about the mail, then there is a very popular 10-minute video all about mail dates there. And the last thing I want to end on, which I didn't have a time to put this on a slide, it's kind of like it's not a high note, but I just learned today that stamp prices are going up again. So July 13th, it has been proposed that stamp prices for postcards will go from 56 cents to 62 cents. So that is horrible. And then they intend to raise stamp prices every July and January, apparently. So it is ridiculous. Back in 2020, when we started this program, postcard stamps cost 35 cents. The things I will say around postcard stamps, since I'm riffing on that and we just have barely enough time, is that postcard stamps hold their value forever. They are identical to forever stamps in that regard. So if you buy stamps, that say postcard stamp, they are good forever. Don't go into the kiosk and buy tons and tons of postcard priced stamps, because they spit out like nominal value stamps. It'll take half an hour to get a couple hundred of them. But you should absolutely consider, if you have the resources to do this and you plan to write a lot of postcards, buying them before July 13th. So you get a lot of time, well, 3 months, a little less than 3 months. The best place to go to buy large quantities of stamps is USPS.com. To go to the Postal Service website directly, they mail them to you. You don't have to worry about driving around to different post offices and they only have a few hundred or they're out. We've put this in emails before, but you do not want to buy stamps from online vendors that claim to give you discounts. Those are counterfeit stamps. They might actually deliver postcards, but it is illegal. Those are scams. Those are counterfeit. There is no such thing as a 15, 20, 25, 30%, 40% discount for stamps. There is no such thing as being able to get a discount by buying stamps in bulk. Those websites can look legitimate. They are not. They are fraud. So unfortunately, the only way to get postcard stamps is to buy them from the post office or their website. And you want to load up before July 13th, when the price goes from 56 cents to 62 cents. So thank you all so much. Keep protesting. We've been protesting at Tesla out here in Chicagoland. We're going to be doing some awesome protests in Illinois. It's massively effective. We have to do everything we can right now. We can walk and chew gum. We can gear up to make sure we're actually winning these elections. We will continue to have elections. We've already proven that we can elect Democrats. We have to do that and fight back and not be silent about the constitutional crisis that we're in. So have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to all your activism this year and next.